In this part, I want to show you how to use the text shadow style property. It's a great little style that you can apply drop shadows to any text. And when we take a look at headings, that's a great area to actually add a drop shadow to. So like in this case, if I take a look at an example of my page here, see how I have hole in one here? It just doesn't really stand out. It just kind of bleeds into that background. And so I really want the text to stand out so it grabs my attention. And one way to do this is with the text shadow. Now just keep in mind the style of font comes in play here. So if you have a skinny font, um, it might not work with a text shadow. So a nice bold font will work. A larger size will work on that regards. So as we take a look at the text hyphen shadow, the text effects that you're working with, you're going to be working with what we call text hyphen shadow, and it has four properties that you have to control. So for this to work out, we need to basically tell it the offset. And when we're talking about offsetting, we're basically telling where we're placing the shadow. So the first value there is going to basically say, okay, move it to the right horizontal 2 pixels. The second one is actually going to move it down. Now you can also use negative values, so you don't have to always use positive, because maybe you want the shadow to go up to the left. The third value, it basically controls how much shading and blurriness of the shadow that you want. You can make it a hard edge or you can make it more of a soft edge. And lastly, we would go in and we put in the color. So in this case, we're using a hexadecimal value. Now keep in mind, if you do work with Internet Explorer 9 or earlier versions, that those earlier versions of IE does not support text shadow. So if you're on IE 8 and you're looking at your web page, you might not see it on that regards. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into my style sheet. I'm going to add to my header section my heading 1, which is going to be the one up there at the top called hole in one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the style called text hyphen shadow, and we're going to have an offset 2 pixels. And let's go ahead and see what this looks like. Let me go ahead and refresh here. Now see how the shadow is offset down to, and it's going to the right and down. And then you can see that it has more of a softer edge around the text itself, and that's because of the 2 pixel blur option we have. Now keep this in mind, you can modify this. So a lot of people like to have a hard edge, and if that's the case, then the third value should go down to a 0 value. So let me go back here and modify this code a little bit. So what I want to do is I want to change this to 1 pixel offset, and I'm going to change this to 0 this time. So what we want to pay attention to is the blurriness of the shadow when I click on refresh here. So you can see that it now becomes a nice little hard edge. It almost creates like a bevel or embossed look for your text on that part. So again, I think shadows really are helpful. You can see down here at the very bottom, I added a little shadow to this phrase in the footer to help it stand out on that regards. You can also add it to your navigation bar if you wanted to. Again, it just helps enhance your text and make it stand out when a viewer is viewing it. Now, one of the things that most people don't know about is that you can actually apply multiple shadows to your text. The key here is to separate them by a comma. So notice here where we have 2 pixels, 0 pixel, and then you notice the comma, then it starts off with the new values. So again, there's 3 actually shadows being applied here. So what I have here is one, this here is more of a lighter green color, and this is a darker green color. Kind of go with the color scheme on that part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this information over again, separated by commas, which is kind of cool. I mean, it's a nice little thing that most students don't know about. They know how to add text shadows, but they don't know that they can add multiple shadows. And so in this case, when I click on refresh, see how it creates like almost a ghosting effect behind the text. So it kind of gives, it makes the shadow stand out a little bit more, makes the text easier to read on that aspect. So again, that's something to experiment with. You don't have to have multiple shadows everywhere, but something that if you want some of your headings to stand out, then you might want to think about that. Now, I would never probably use multiple shadows for something very small, such as join, this little phrase here or my navigation bar, because I think it's going to make it a little bit harder to read. So that's something to look at, and again, to understand what fonts you're working with. So again, really nice feature is that the text shadow, you can add multiple shadows, but just make sure you separate the shadows by the comma on that part, and the properties I should say. And then then sometimes it just comes down with experimentation of making sure you get the right colors, and in this case also the blurriness. So notice the second one has a 25 pixel blur, the other one has a 5 pixel blur. So again, something to watch out for, and when you're working with that, you have to kind of experiment.